Sorry for coming so directly. Good evening to everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Esteban González Pons, Vice President of the European Parliament, one of the Vice Presidents responsible for the House of the European History. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this unique museum, which talks about our shared history as Europeans, a history based on the fundamental values of human dignity, freedom, democracy, and rule of law. These values allowed us to put our differences aside, to work together, and to create a community of countries that would offer its citizens a better future, far, far from wars. Indeed, the European Union has been a space of peace and security with the largest single market in the world. It also offers its citizens the freedom to live, study, and work anywhere. However, as you will know, the EU faces significant challenges. I'm referring to climate change, with its extreme weather events that risk human lives and causes high economic damages. I'm talking about terrorism and cyber attacks that affects our critical infrastructures and the security of our societies. I am also speaking about conflicts such as the unjustified and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine by Russia, or disinformation, which jeopardizes our democratic processes like elections. All these challenges, including health crises like COVID-19 pandemic, have a global dimension. This means that the European Union must be prepared and united to face them collectively. To be prepared, that's the question. Being aware of this situation, President von der Leyen appointed Ms. Hadja Lahbib as Commissioner in charge of Preparedness and Crisis Management. Commissioner Lahbib will help to improve our ability to respond to crises swiftly and effectively, protecting both our environment and our citizens. We know that many Europeans think that they do not have enough information about the current challenges. We also know that most of them don't feel well prepared to deal with emergencies that could occur in the places where they live. For these reasons, one of the tasks of our Commissioner will be to develop a European preparedness strategy to improve our ability to detect, anticipate, and react to the crises that will come close to us. However, preparation does not only depend on the institutions. It also requires the active involvement of everyone, and especially the young people like you. That's the reason why we are here today. We believe that you can contribute in these three key areas. Disaster preparedness, by innovating with digital knowledge to identify risks and influence policy. Public health, by sharing information and volunteering during health crises and disasters. And inclusion during emergencies, by ensuring that vulnerable groups will receive the aid that they need. No one should be left behind when a disaster strikes and essential services fall. You may have heard many times that young people are the future. However, I believe that the young people are also the present. Your creativity, commitment, and ability to connect with technologies make you essential in responding to the crisis. For example, after the recent floods that affected Valencia, my own city, you, young people, were decisive during the emergency response. You lead the cleanup efforts, organize massive clothing and food drives, and share critical information on rescue and recovery operations that followed the disaster. I know it very well. That is why we need your fresh ideas on what we can do and how we can do better in building a stronger European culture of preparedness. This is important as the future of the EU depends on our ability to face challenges together. I encourage you to engage with Commissioner Lahbib and share your thoughts. I'm sure that they will help us to make a more secure, prosperous and sustainable Europe. I hope you enjoyed the event and that we meet again soon. Your Commissioner, Madame Lahbib.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And dear friends, welcome again to Brussels. It's a real pleasure for me to be with you, to see so many faces coming from different countries of Europe and to see embodying its diversity. I have to say that I have been waiting for this moment because this moment is all about exchange, about dialogue. And I have to say that I'm eager to listen to you and to hear your ideas about how we can better be prepared for the next future, for the present as well, by the way. And I know that you have been visiting ERCC, so you have seen the screens monitoring the different parts of the globes of the European Union, so you have maybe already a good idea of the world we are living in today. It's a world more dangerous than ever, with wars, with climate change and new technologies that just a few years ago only existed in science fiction. And this is our reality today. So we need to be ready. We need to be better prepared. And when I look at you, when I look at this young audience, I see the future of our European strategy, our European preparedness. And I feel hopeful, I feel optimistic, and I feel energized, as always, when I meet young people. So I would like, maybe before we start to exchange, say a few words to you. Please be bold. Get involved, see how you can make the difference, see how you can help your neighbor, your friends, your maybe one day your daughter, your mother, to face the different hazards that we are confronted today. It is, I'm sure, I'm convinced from you, from your friends, your networks, that the ideas of tomorrow will be born. It is from you that new tools and new ways of working will emerge. Europe needs, as the President has just mentioned, your energy, your passion, your fresh eyes, and your can-do spirit. And I'm right there with you. I will support you in every manner I can. You can count on me. Today, we will focus on 3 areas: disaster preparedness, health preparedness, and inclusion in emergencies. Let's start with disaster preparedness. The first principle is to keep everyone we need, everyone on board. Everyone safe and everyone on board. Preparedness must no longer be a specialized field for a few select experts. Every level of government must step up. The EU, of course, national, regional, and local governments. Preparedness cannot simply be a concept. It must be a reality. And we need everyone in our societies doing their parts. Citizens, the private sector, volunteers, and yes, you, the young people. We need you to take a leadership role to strengthen our prevention, preparation, response, and recovery. And we will make this new culture of preparedness 100% inclusive. This includes the most vulnerable, such as young people with disabilities, for instance. You know, for my first mission as a commissioner, I visited Poland and Ukraine. I saw firsthand what it means to be prepared. All people, young people, experts, volunteers, adapting, cooperating, and innovating with sparks in their eyes. We can learn a lot from them, and we will learn from them. And I hope we will hear from our Polish and Ukrainian friends who are joining us today. As you know, right now, as I've been mentioning, we are preparing an ambitious new preparedness strategy. And this strategy will get, as just said, everyone involved, taking a whole hazard, whole of society, and whole of government approach. And young people must be part of it. Your skills and your innovative ideas will breathe life into our preparedness plans and help to develop the skills and workforce to better anticipate and prepare for risk. Our Union Civil Protection Knowledge Network is a great example. Since 2021, it has strengthened capacity building and exchanges between young people, and connected young firewomen and firemen, rescuers, nurses, and other civil protection professionals to our European civil protection community. And it is also support to the work of young people in science by sponsoring researchers in the field of preparedness. So we must also absolutely change our mindset and build a new culture of preparedness. And this starts again with you, the younger people. The new generation will live in a new world, so they should lead this change. And I will exchange an idea. You all know the enormously successful Erasmus Plus program for students' exchange. I was one of the first, I'm very proud to say that, to repeat that all the time, that I was one of the very first from Belgium to benefit from this tremendous program. So I believe we should build on Erasmus Plus for young volunteers for preparedness. Maybe we could call this program Young European Heroes or something sexy like this. It could provide training in the most relevant risks and different member states and raise awareness about other risks like, for instance, something that we are not always aware, disinformation, which is one of the major threats that we are confronted and today, a kind of hybrid threat, hybrid attacks. We can and should learn from each other, and as we have a lot of people coming from different countries, I'm sure that you have a different a feeling of the threats, depending on the countries where you are based. Italy feel threatened by earthquake, and I'm sure here in Belgium we don't have the same feeling, and maybe in Finland it's different because you're sharing more than 1,000 kilometer borders with Russia. So war is much more something that you will consider as a threat. So, dear friends, being ready for everything also means being prepared for health threats. COVID-19 may be in the rear-view mirror, but we must never forget its hard lessons. We must better anticipate future threats and strengthen our ability to respond to health emergencies, both within the EU, but also in the rest of the world. Over the past 3 years, HERA, our European Health Emergency Preparedness and Response body, has led the foundation for stronger preparedness and response coordination. COVID hit young people particularly. causing mental health issues, especially for LGBTIQ youth. Depression more than doubled. Nearly 1 in 3 adolescents reported a negative impact on their mental health. Suicide rates increased, and so did youth unemployment. And I would like to hear from you about your own experience during the COVID-19 and how we can better be prepared for the next pandemic to come, because the next pandemic is not a question of if, but when it will happen. So we must be ready. Dear friends, today I'm here to listen to you. These exchanges are so valuable in making our union safer and better prepared. And now, before we start to exchange, and as I said at the beginning, I'm most eager to listen to you, but I have a little quiz. Do you know what is this? How we call this? Do you have an idea? Yeah, you're coming from Ukraine, huh, if I remember well. So this is a grab bag. So it's this is my personal grab bag in case of emergency. So do you think we can start to play this game and to see what's inside? And those who are mentioning goods items will receive, let's start, like this, a grab bag as a gift. So what should be inside, in your opinion?
Bandage.
Bandage. By the way, it's more complex than these things. It's not only about bandage. It's health, emergency, prepare, and response, you know, with a lot of things inside. Let's open it. And of course, I will find bandage. So you receive a bag, a grab bag. So what's inside? Please. On the second row, maybe. A water. So she won a grab bag as well. There is not a lot of things inside again, so only one item is inside.
Personal ID?
Yes, it could be. I think we should add it. So she can have a grab bag as well. Yeah. Yeah, but you can't play a game, because especially because you come from Ukraine and you know a lot of things already.
Maybe a mean of communication?
Yeah, but no, not a mean of communication. But that would be, yes, he can want a grab bag as well. You can add these things, but it's becoming heavy. You don't need a food to survive for 3 days. You need water. So, but okay, you receive a grab bag, because I will be keen to have some food inside as well. One thing is missing to survive in case of emergency crisis. I have it in my hands, so it's not very heavy. Yeah. A passport? A matchbox? Nearly. You nearly won. She can have a grab bag as well. Yeah, a torch, yes. So, but all of you receive a grab bag at the end. Thank you. Now we can start our exchange.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner Lahbib, and thanks to Vice President González Pons to welcoming us and to welcome this dialogue in this really symbolic venue. Yeah, thank you. Let's play a little quiz as well. Like, who here have a grab bag at home? Who is ready? Raise your hand, please. 1 person, 2 person only. Okay, I will ask you, to all of you here, but also to our online audience, to think about what they will put. here the Commissioner already gave us a good idea of what we could put in the grab bag, but also to start making one today. Yes. Let's move on to the presentation of each group. I will come here on stage with us right now, the first spokesperson of the disaster preparedness group. I think it was Mariana. Yes, Mariana, could you please come on stage? Thanks a lot. So Mariana will give us a small presentation. Please, before doing the presentation, could you please come sit? Please. You can grab the microphone as well. Before doing the presentation, please remind us what was asked during the workshop. And then you can present the ideas that you have been discussing in the group. They were in the group of 7-8 people this morning. Yes, and then I will open the floor to the participant in here and to add or to share their experience on this topic. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. I thought I was going to have the paper, so so thank you. So our scenario was a scenario where we had a lot of climate events happening, and we were a youth organization, and at the same time we were facing the threat of misinformation, and the people were not prepared individually and collectively. So we had to develop a set of measures and objectives to tell you what EU and local authorities can do to be better prepared in a case of a climate disaster, for example. So the first thing that we need to say is this should be linked to adaptation. And so when you talk about climate change, this needs to be linked to adaptation and then preparedness. And the first measure that we identified that could help is public education. So youth can play a crucial role in public education through SMS alerts, to helping with simulations in schools, for example, or universities. And I think that's, and this, of course. And we can help disseminate, if you have it, but it doesn't, 72 hours guidance manual for home preparedness. And we could distribute this in schools and in our local villages and cities. The second thing that is related to this is misinformation. So how do we fight misinformation? And I have to say, this is not just a threat when it comes to climate disasters, it's a threat to our democracies. So we have to take this as a real risk. And one thing that we can do and you can do with the youth organizations is to build advocacy and communication campaigns. We can create content on TikTok, on Instagram. We can create less heavy content. That DG ECHO does an amazing job, for example, on Instagram, but it's too formal, too heavy. And we look at social media as an escape to the reality. We don't look as a place to find more disasters. And the last thing that we discussed is we can help you mapping the workforce needs and the workforce availability. So there's a lot of youth organizations around Europe. There's a lot of people that are available to be volunteers, but you don't have a map of this organization, not on everything that they can do. It can be communication, it can be advocacy, it can be accountability, it can be policy papers, it can be a lot of things. And maybe if we were connected and if we had this map, we could prepare in better ways. Thank you. I think that's it.
Thanks a lot, Mariana, for those ideas. Thanks a lot for summarizing as well the discussion that you had this morning. You can stay with us on stage while we are discussing this topic. Victor, if can I ask you to pass the microphones? Thanks a lot. Does someone wants to say anything regarding this topic? Does someone has any contribution to add of what Mariana just said? Any experience that you want to share linked to disaster preparedness or any other ideas. Please raise your hand, stand up, take the microphone, say your name, where you're from, and your idea. Yes, Michelle.
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to add two main points based also on my experience. I believe that the European Commission and the European Union more globally can act on two different means of action. For example, investing in the reserve, in different army from the member states. I have been a reservist in the French army for 6 years, and I believe that was a good way to increase my resilience abilities and also my faculty to coordinate with the military if a major crisis occurs, and also my engagement in some sort of an association, as I told before. You told Commissioner Lahbib about a program for voluntaries in the European Union. I believe those kind of programs would be very interesting, but also to help the association that already exists to increase their activities regarding resilience, regarding preparedness. My association, for example, Les Jeunes IHEDN, organize a lot of workshops, a lot of conferences, especially on misinformation about what other countries can do to destabilize France or other countries from the European Union. So I believe this could be another mean of action. And also, I know an European civic program already exists. Someone that I know is called Benjamin Sibyl, and he has developed this program. And I believe since 2020, 500 persons already had the chance to participate to this program. And it's also linked with preparedness and citizen awareness. So it could be also a mean of action for the European Commission. Those are just ideas, but I wanted to add this contribution. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michelle. I think there's a lot that resonates with what you already said. I think we want to learn more about this young European heroes as well a bit later.
So it resonates indeed with what I have in mind and what I've already exchanged with many governments since I'm a commissioner. And I think that his idea was on the table since years, but never been developed. And that's why I may take this challenge, because everybody's agreed that it is a good idea, but we need to transform this idea on reality. And especially as I heard that it resonates in you about when it comes to the military reserve, the citizenship, it will reinforce also the commitment, the engagement of our young people to their society, and create, I'm sure, will strengthen the bonds, between us, to have young people already knowing what behavior should we have in case of major threats, no matter if it is a pandemic or a cyclone or a war or a terrorist attack or a hybrid threat, something that we don't know already. I mean, so it is very important to have this map. Maybe also we will implement it with a map, because it's all about communication, also to create awareness. And also it will respond to one of the major concerns in our young citizens, the fact that they are not aware of what can we face in the near future. In a major threat will be a climate change, but floods, wildfires, and so on. And it will be also an occasion to stop reacting and to be more pro actors. And I would like also to talk about maybe disinformation. I agree with you that we should communicate in a more simple and funny manner. I agree that the social media, the success of the social media is because it is also to escape from reality, and we have to plunge in this parallel world and to create awareness, but among our young citizens. But it's not easy because TikTok and so on are not, in our hands, and so we have to also count. Maybe we should create a scholarship education program. It should be part of maybe the Erasmus plus Young Heroes, something like this.
Thanks a lot, Madam Commissioner. Yes, indeed, engagement is key. I think we have here all those young people in front of us are really engaged and they're willing to be prepared. Maybe they're missing the information. And this information was actually the common point of each group that we had. Maybe we can move on to the next group, to the next presentation on health emergency preparedness. Manu, please come.
Hi everyone, I am Manuel, I'm from Italy and I work Hi, I am Manuel, I'm from Italy and I work for the European Federation of Nurses Associations. So our group focused on health preparedness, and the main threat that was identified in the scenario was that they found a new COVID strain which had led already to 3 deaths. This COVID strain came from South America, and there is a lot of panic ongoing, a lot of misinformation, which is causing a lot of stress in the wider population. So obviously the first main threat that we identified was the health threat itself. There's a possible health threat, despite it is unclear how much of a threat it actually is at that stage. And there is a lot of misinformation and a lot of disinformation ongoing, which leads to panic, and it normally affects mainly the most vulnerable communities, leading to stigma and leading to segregation. And these factors then are aggravated by other big factors, mainly the fact that healthcare budgets, both at the EU level and at the national level, are already being cut, despite the COVID-19 pandemic allegedly finished only a short time ago. This is having a big impact on many factors, including the shortage of healthcare professionals, of nurses, of doctors. It is having a big impact on cut in the funding for research in certain cases, on the stockpiling of critical things that must have had, like vaccines, like masks. So these are the main threats that we identified. Now we came up with some recommendations to tackle these threats. First of all, it's clear that young people and youth organizations can play a big role, especially at the local level, at the community level, in supporting the spread of good information, of quality information, and educating the people and going directly to the people that sometimes can have less access to high quality information. But then also that umbrella organizations at the European level can play a key role in connecting all the different national associations in spreading good information to different stakeholders. Then, obviously, it is key that we stop cutting the funding and that we have more funding. And this is key to support the development of the healthcare workforce, to have highly qualified and competent healthcare professionals, but also to support youth organizations and volunteers in supporting the people, in supporting the wider population. Then we also realize that it's key to develop independent, interprofessional, intergenerational crisis management teams at the local level, but also the national and the EU level. And finally, that it is key to learn from past mistakes. And that's the only way to really be prepared. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manu, for summarizing what you have been discussing this morning. Now I would like to open the floor to the participant if you want to add anything on this topic of something yet to talk about this morning or your past experience. Yes, Erato, and then Anna, and then Cecilia.
Thank you. I think very important points were raised, but as I said in the morning, I would like to add that during a crisis, we should not forget that our most vulnerable people, like patients with chronic conditions or patients, like people that might need more help. So during a crisis, being prepared for people to have access to medicines, access to like their regular doctor appointments, and just being more aware that like during an emergency, we shouldn't discontinue the care that people need. And I think it falls into the previous discussion that we have about inclusivity, just taking into consideration maybe the emergency backpack could be adapted for some people because they might need different equipment, different access. So I think inclusivity in general and being aware of, I guess, special needs for specific people.
Indeed. A really important point that you just raised, Erato. Thanks a lot. Hannah?
Yeah, I just want to add that in the case of emergency, what is the most important is actually the network of people, of volunteers, of people who know what should they do at this specific space and time. And in the experience of Ukraine, for example, when we had the COVID emergency, we developed a network of volunteer organizations, patient organizations. So we were prepared for the next emergency crisis, which happened with the war. That's why it was so efficient. That's why people already knew how to act before. That's why people already had in their phones the phone number of people who they can contact in any region, in any city, and ask, what do you need? How can we help you? And now these days, we actually mark 3 years of war in Ukraine. And for me personally, at this date, on the 26th of February, I arrived to the Polish-Ukrainian border with the first people from MSF HQ to set up the emergency response. And this is something, yes, you can be prepared technically, because in the emergency, there is some toolkit. What do you do? What steps goes first? What steps goes after? But what you cannot be prepared is emotionally. You cannot be ready for this type of things. And unfortunately, we should just act according to what is written in the toolkit, trying to forget about our own experience, our own emotions, in order to help those who are around us, those who are in more vulnerable situations.
Hannah, indeed, it's really important what you just mentioned. I think we all agree with you. Networking, have a good network of organization and people together is really important. Being prepared, but of course, being prepared is not everything. Thanks a lot for sharing that with us. Please, Cecilia.
Yeah, thank you for raising the Ukraine. I'm sorry for my voice. But yeah, I feel like young people, we know how interconnected we are with the world, and because of that, we understand that security does not start in Europe. We need to go beyond, and we need the budget of the European External Action Service that reflects that. And the pandemic has proved us that health is key on all of this, and because of that, I think that now that we have these initiatives like the Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and the Global Fund, we need to continue supporting them. The EU has done such an amazing work so far, but now the replenishment of these initiatives is coming, and I just wanted to ask for continued support to these initiatives.
And then the question of funds is a big question as well. Anybody else? Yes, please. And then Nada.
Joy from Belgium. Basically, for having a good emergency tactic, I think before all that we should also protect our data, because I know that cyber attacks are always going into the public health domain. So basically, if the public health domain is already under attack and the data of the patients are already putting in wrong, or even blood group is putting in wrong, the emergency case can be a little bit problematic. So if we can also focus on how to protect our data, and health data especially, by those cybersecurity that we can develop.
Yes, thanks a lot. A really important question raised about the data as well, definitely. Please, Nada, you can take the floor. Yeah.
I would just add that during COVID, we lost 30% of our nurses. They left the profession, and nursing students are also stopping their studies. They're not finishing it, or sometimes they're finished, but they're not working as nurses. And this is because of the lack of attractiveness of the profession. The work conditions are very difficult. There's a lack of recognition. Violence on the workplace is present more than ever. And I think to be really prepared for any health emergency, we need to invest in our nurses. They're the first one that we need. They're the person we build a relationship with. They're really key for citizen preparedness and to really be prepared correctly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nada. I believe this is a national competence, but this is definitely a question that can be raised at the EU level. Anybody else wants to take the floor? Yes, please.
Thank you. And no, I just wanted to draw a link between the first group and the second group, because I think that when preparing for climate crisis or health crisis in the future, we really need to recognize that those are interlinked in many ways. So, for example, we have so many threats from the health side that are really close with the environmental dimension, such as AMR, for example. So we really need to think with a One Health approach to preparedness.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I am turning now to do you have any?
Yeah, just some comments very, very briefly. I will start with the end. Of course, all the crises are interlinked and more often are coming with a kind of cascade. You know, when you have, for instance, war, it creates displacement of millions of people, and then risks of pandemics increase, and diseases and so on. And so, of course, that's why we call the strategy a whole of hazard approach, because pandemics and natural disasters, but sometimes as well war, ignore borders. They don't care about the borders. And when it comes to the nurses, yeah, we all have in mind this evening at 7 where we were outside applauding the nurses and doctors and so on. But again, you know, their conditions didn't evolve in the good direction, let's say so. So we need to invest, of course, in our health services. And as you underlined very well, it's a national competence. And this is also the limits where sometimes it's creating a lot of frustration, because Europe comes in support to the member states. We are not replacing them. We can help them, we can support them, we can, yes, define a strategy, but they have to implement it. And we are limited to the treaties, to respect the treaties and the national competences. And there we have sometimes some issues, especially with countries like, let's take Belgium, where you have different levels of governance. Most of the time, the first responders are very local. It's local, regional, and then federal. And the federal level can activate the UCPM mechanism, for instance. And when you take what happened very recently in Ireland or in Spain, we had to wait until the regional level is allowing the national level to activate the European civil protection mechanism and to activate the solidarity. And sometimes it takes time, but we can't intervene as long as the mechanism is not activated, UCPM mechanism is not activated. And in the case of, I don't want to mention specific cases, but ERCC that you visited this morning is waiting and sometimes is launching some signals to the member states thanks to our Copernicus satellite, who observes in real time the natural disasters that can occur and prevent them. But then we wait until they activate the mechanism. Yes, cybersecurity exchange of intelligence services is certainly also one of the solutions to protect our data. And when I was in Ukraine, I've learned a lot of things. And one of the threats that the country has been facing is cyber attack under the population services, all the data, the marriage, who is married with whom, what is the property, and so on, the civil data of the whole of population. Of course, it was saved, thanks to God, but and their resilience, but it was a major threat, and we are well aware of that. And it's allow me to make a link with disinformation and misinformation that creates panic. We all remember the conspiration theory during the COVID-19, who create a lot of reluctance and fears and skepticism among some people to be vaccinated, and so we have been facing the same things very recently with Mpox, that a start of pandemic that started in Rwanda and in DRC. We have been the first to deliver vaccines. It was last September, but then we were confronted with misinformation, with reluctance of the population. They were thinking that it will attend their fertility. And it was, a narrative that was spread like this in the population. That's why we need connectivity, we need reliable person, we need influencers. We are in connection with sometimes, religious people, leaders who can influence the people and create trust. And trust is really a key word when it comes to preparedness strategy. If we don't trust each other, if we don't exchange data, if we don't trust vaccines, medical countermeasures, we are not going to be safe, because as long as we are not all of us in security, none of us is in security. And so this is a few examples of your reaction, but I'm not going to be more longer.
Thanks a lot for your input. Indeed, disinformation, it was the common point, as I already said, to all of the topic that we discussed this morning. We discussed it this morning that we are all responsible of that youth organizations are also responsible for diffusing the good information, and government as well. But this is really a real problem of today. I thank you. Thanks a lot, Manu. We'll call the third spokesperson on, yes, thank you, on inclusion emergency. Thanks.
Hello. As the two previous groups, my group also had a scenario to work with. We did not work with the scenario, but we did talk generally about how we can ensure inclusivity in preparedness. We arrange our thoughts into three pillars. The first one being actually hearing the communities that the crisis is affecting. And this should be a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer that, of course, youth should be involved, but unfortunately it is not. We have many examples from, for example, you, Madam Commissioner, talked about the bad effects of the COVID pandemic on youth. And during the COVID pandemic, we had so many young advocates telling about how these things are disproportionately affecting young people, but they were not being heard. And now we can see the results. One concrete way to hear young people in preparedness issues is utilizing the different EU youth programs that already exist. I'm talking about EU Youth Dialogue, youth conferences, the European Youth Forum. We have many ways to participate young people, and those should be utilized properly. Also about here in the community, we had an idea of a panel of diversity experts to the ERCC. So there would be some concrete experts on the topic. Then on the second pillar is actually utilizing the NGOs. I talked a bit about this already, but let's delve into a bit deeper. We have many examples from Ukraine about when the government had to focus on the war effort, then the civil society took more responsibility on keeping people in touch with the society. So what we should do is, I don't think we're utilizing the work that the NGOs do in Europe at the moment properly, because we have so many NGOs that do an amazing job, and that should be utilized so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The one concrete idea we had is an online platform where different NGOs could register their capabilities and that it could thus be better tracked. NGOs could register like, oh yeah, we can reach these communities, we know these language groups, we have these and these capabilities, and we would love to work together with the government. And this could also ensure that the cooperation would be more seamless. So we have many examples about how NGOs have battle disinformation, they build communities, and what most matters to preparedness, they build resilience. And what we need, now we get to the third pillar, what we need, what the NGOs need is funding and resources. And I know that the resources are very scarce right now, but I do hope, especially in the Balkan, youth NGOs are right now in deep trouble because the United States stopped their funding to the NGOs. So I think, as in many areas in politics, Europe needs to take its place into a leader of liberal democracy, and this is one of those topics. Also, another idea was funding especially youth-led projects, which would be great. Thank you.
This presentation and for the great idea. I really like the kind of UCPM of NGO, the mapping of NGO that the government can use. It's a bit what we are doing at the ERCC in ECHO.
I can't just react to this because we just met yesterday Voice, which is a network of NGOs, and we are the major founder of Voices to allow us to have a contact with all our stakeholders, and NGOs are our main stakeholders. They are those who implement our strategies on the ground when it comes to crisis, humanitarian aid, and so on. So we have a very good overview of NGOs, and we are well aware of the impact of the US withdrawing of many NGOs, but we stay committed. And I have to say, we are proud to become the first major actor when it comes to humanitarian aid, because we become, thanks to US, the first donor now. And we are ready to take this leader role.
Thanks a lot. And I think we can all agree that this kind of dialogue with different group of people is also really important. And thank you as well for your input. Really important what you just said before. And now I would like to open the floor. Yes, please, Emma. Yeah. Don't even have to say anything.
Thank you. I wanted to come back to something that was mentioned several times already, that we need to learn from our past to be more prepared. And in this case, we're speaking about inclusion, and it's important to include and protect our minorities. So the best example is to come back to COVID, when indeed there was a lot of misinformation that was spread around the vaccines, but one of the conspiracy theories that was being spread is that the Jews were behind everything that happened during COVID. They were responsible for the pandemic because it would have been profitable afterwards and everything that comes with it. So this political and financial aspect was targeting a minority during a crisis. So it's important to be prepared for the next crisis, because we also saw it with the start of the war in Ukraine, where one of the point of Putin was rhetoric, anti-Semitic rhetoric as well. So we can see that in every crisis we have scapegoats. In those cases it was a lot of Jewish anti-Semitic tropes. So maybe just a heads up to make sure that we need to fight against anti-Semitism and all kinds of discrimination beforehand. Otherwise, if we just arrive in a crisis, we will not solve it. And I'm pretty sure now that if tomorrow we have another health emergency or any kind of emergency, we will have the same situation. So maybe something to work a bit more on with Katharina Revan-Schnoorbein, the coordinator on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life at the European Commission. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Emma. Indeed, protecting the minority is something that we have to work on. We have to be prepared as well for that. Anybody else want to take the floor? Yes, Cecilia.
Just adding a few points of what my colleagues mentioned before. One of the things that we noticed when we visit today the UCPM is that in the pool of capacities, they are not measuring the capacities of the states in terms of inclusion. And I think it's really important to track this, because if we manage to track this, then if we involve NGOs, they can help with capacity building, and we can do this connection. And also, in specific cases where you have one vulnerable group, then you know what state you should reach out for, depending on the capacities for inclusion as well in preparedness. And we realized that wasn't considered. But I also want to talk about this information. We talk so much about how that can affect minority groups. But, well, as a young professional working on gender and also as a young woman queer, I'm really, really concerned about these narratives going on against human rights, against diversity, that are becoming part of politics, that are affecting funding. And I think this should be part of the disinformation efforts from this inclusive point of view. We need to reach out more to young people, but also to young men. We need to focus on that and involve them. And also at the EU level, I feel like there's a conversation that needs to happen it's happening at my work, so I want to bring it here as well, that we need to know how are we going to promote these values. We need to be strategic, we need to be proactive, as you mentioned. So we need to build a strategy of, okay, we have now these actors that are against gender, against diversity, against human rights. How should we approach it from the EU together to work with them, to not take stances back, but we need to change the approach, because the current approach is not going to work. We need to learn other ways to talk about gender, other umbrellas. We need to not talk only about the values, which is super important, but we also need to learn that some of these actors, they don't really care that much about the values as the EU does, but they do care about efficiency. So let's bring this double approach. We should promote equality, but also this is not just for promoting equality, this is also because equality brings effectiveness in preparedness. So I wanted to say that because it's really one of my biggest concerns. And then just bringing back to the role of NGOs and how they are so important to reach vulnerable groups, especially in education, since not everyone has access. We have to focus education in all senses, in all 3 levels, from when they are young till when they are older. And in that sense, NGOs are a big part of it. And as a specific idea, because a few weeks ago, my organization, Promote Ukraine, reached out to you and your team, we are starting to organize some civil fairs to prepare for crisis, starting in Brussels, and hopefully will be spread around Europe. And yeah, we'll really appreciate the opportunity to discuss another time for the Commission support, because I think, NGOs should be more engaged, and youth are part of the NGOs. Like, we are doing, all of my friends are doing 2 volunteers. I'm doing 3, I think we are really engaged. Just want to ask for that support. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Cecilia. Indeed, the NGOs have a big role to play, as we already mentioned before. And I can see that disinformation is a big concern here. It's coming back at every conversation that we're having. So it's definitely something that we need to tackle here. Education is, of course, one of the solutions here. We can talk about that a bit more later. Please, Mariana, you wanted to take the floor, and then Victor.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to talk about 2 things in my experience. So funding and the way we are using knowledge of the youth. So I've been saying this for some years now. So a lot of the adults are saying youth are their hope and we are going to be tomorrow leaders. But I've been seeing this year after year, we don't have funding. We are living a lot of crises. We are struggling for employment, for housing, for climate crisis, for education, for a lot of things. And still, we have politicians telling us, please be our hope, please be the leaders of tomorrow. Even though we don't have capacity building, most of the dialogues are not actually meaningful youth engagement. And there's still a lot of institutions that don't talk with the youth, and they don't want this dialogue to happen. So the first thing I want to highlight is this thing of funding. So let's put Erasmus Plus as an example. So there's a program fund called Solidarity Projects. The budget for each project is 7,000. What do you do with 7,000 for a year project, for example? Like, you give 7,000 to an NGO for them to develop a project during a year. That's like less than, 600 per month to develop a project. That's not meaningful youth engagement. That's not meaningful funding to do something. And the second thing is, we should be using the knowledge of the youth. We should be using the universities, the centers that are created around Europe to innovate, to develop solutions and proposals. And I think we are not having this dialogue too. And the last thing I wanted to say is I do a lot of community-led litigation. So I go to the communities in villages and I talk with them. And last year, it took me 8 months to gain the community trust. 8 months. And I was only able to do this because I had funding from the European Youth Foundation. Thanks. But I'm telling you this because if all of this is going to be implemented, and if you think these good ideas, we really, really, really need funding to do this because we are already struggling in our daily lives. And we really want to be volunteers, we really want to be leaders, but we cannot be like full-time volunteers. Thank
Thank you. If I may add to that, we've had a lot of talk about Finland on how this kind of project-based funding is actually quite harmful, since it doesn't enable any long-term work to be done. So that is definitely a very good point.
Thanks a lot. I would say that youth is the leader of tomorrow, but also of today. So funding is a question that is always coming back.
Yeah, the funding. But when it comes to our funding, we are nowadays negotiating in the near future what we call the MFF. And so we will have each commissioners following their own portfolios a part of the global budget. And it's important to have everything in mind. Everything is urgent. Everything is important. And we have to share, these funds. And it's sure that when it comes to my portfolio, we've been facing disaster after disasters during the last mandate with the COVID-19, with the war in Ukraine and so on. But the good news is that we started with 1.9 billion euro as a start, and it is more than we had at the beginning of the last mandate. So on the contrary of a lot of states, especially certain which are beyond the Atlantic, we decided to maintain and to improve our contribution. And now we have, as you know, a gender equality budget. We have monitoring how this budget is going through the different level of our population, and the most discriminated are women. When we launched, for instance, what we call the Next Generation EU to relaunch the economy after the COVID-19, we discovered that the major amount of this budget went to the STEM, so new technologies and so on, that are mainly led by men. And so we had to correct this trend. And nowadays, for the future, I would like to have equality budget mainstreaming, to be sure that no one is left behind, and that everybody, of course, as well, the young are going to benefit from this budget in the right manner. I don't remember what was. There were a lot of questions. So the NGOs, as a global actor, we don't intervene ourselves. We have always stakeholders on the ground. And when I'm going to Jordan, to Syria, when I'm going to Ukraine, to Poland, and so on, I'm visiting the NGOs. I have meeting with UN agencies, and I will have one in a couple of minutes, because yes, there is shifting. We are at a shifting point with what happened now with USAID and so on. So we are going to be more efficient and more coordinated in the ground, but be sure that we are collaborating every day with NGOs. I don't remember. Yes, anti-Semitism, and like others, that's why we are well aware of this trend, and that's why we have now a commissioner responsible and dedicated to anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred. It goes hand in hand. Unfortunately, it was a trend that we experienced since October the 7th attack in Gaza, and the consequences that we all know. And we have seen a polarization in our public opinion, and also manipulation, of course. During the last election in Belgium, it was a topic at the highest, at the headlines, unfortunately, and misused also of this dramatic event here in our European soil. So we need to create awareness also in this aspect in our population. And I totally agree that when it comes to the person with disabilities, we have to take into account every level of our, every kind of our citizens, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. And it is clear that in every crisis, there is an equality dimension. The first victim of a crisis are persons with disabilities, women, children, and the elderly. I saw that firsthand when I went to Ukraine. For instance, I was visiting a lot of shelters, and in those shelters, there were only grandmothers taking care of their grandchildren, women trying to connect and to help in the battlefields or to maintain alive the economy and so on. So we have to take into account all the people, all the part of our society, and most of all, of most vulnerable one.
I think we can all agree on that. We all have a role and we all have a responsibility for that. Thanks a lot, Emilia. So before we conclude, I would like to open the floor. For any other remarks or interventions on the topic of the day, which is citizens' risk awareness and preparedness. Victor, please go ahead.
So, as you said, my name is Victor, and I'm hereby representing the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, especially the European and Central Asian Youth Network, which actually encompasses 53 national societies. The IFRC is deeply committed to disaster management by placing people at the forefront and in the center of its efforts, believing that empowering individuals, and especially young people and local networks, is actually the most effective approach to prepare for and build resilient communities. And the commitment was demonstrated in October during the RCRC International Conference, where a resolution was adopted which called the national societies as well as the states to strengthen disaster risk governance through comprehensive legal and regulatory frameworks in line with the organization's distinctive mandate and approach. While young volunteers are often seen in the red vests, as you all know, during emergencies, our role extends far beyond that, and as part of the Big Six youth organizations, we focus on preparedness and education, leading initiatives for children and youth that enhance community resilience. A great example of the partnership is between the Bulgarian Red Cross Youth and the Civil Protection and Fire Safety Directorate, which conducts trainings, competitions, and awareness campaigns. To increase awareness of disaster prevention and response, the FRC, the national societies, and youth-led campaigns leverage social media, what we actually discussed already, and that ensures that the young people can access essential information through their preferred platforms. These efforts are vital in promoting preparedness both before, during, and after a disaster, and engages and empowers the communities. We commend the Commission's commitment to advancing inclusivity in disaster response and management, emphasizing that protection, gender, and inclusion are already essential pillars of the national society's efforts before, during, and after a crisis or a disaster. This approach ensures that vulnerabilities and disabilities of all individuals are actually considered and addressed at every stage. Furthermore, we actively involve representatives from vulnerable communities in the planning process to ensure that their specific needs and perspectives are fully integrated into our programs. By engaging these communities directly, we strengthen our ability to provide responsive and effective support, making our disaster response efforts more inclusive, equitable, and impactful. In strengthening disaster preparedness and response, youth are not just contributors, but essential leaders driving resilience, inclusivity, and community engagement across Europe. We believe the example of the Red Cross is valuable to the Commission as the role of young people in the national societies, peer-to-peer initiatives, and youth-led campaigns ensures that preparedness efforts effectively reach all levels of society. To build a more resilient region, we believe the Commission must continue fostering collaboration, strengthening legal and policy frameworks, and ensuring that young people have tools and opportunities to actually lead. By investing in youth leadership and inclusive preparedness strategies, we can create a future where every individual is empowered to face crisis with strength and solidarity. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Victor, for the proposals and for telling us the actions of the Red Cross. Thanks. Anybody else wants to take the floor? Yes, Colm, maybe?
Hello. I'll reassure you, I'm not going to ask for more funding, so that's just a start. No, but I'm going to bring your attention to one particular point which has been mentioned variably, so namely that of risk awareness. I think that's one of the main issues facing a lot of people, whether it's young people or vulnerable groups. And I'm quite glad that we started our tour today upstairs in front of the corridor that was all riddled with bullets. But I think it points to something which we don't consider enough, which is simply that, well, artwork in the cultural sector also has a word to say in terms of, well, awareness. And that was an example of, well, an artwork that was showing us the realities of the war in Ukraine. So I do believe that integration of the cultural sector into risk awareness can be a way of, well, reaching out to not only, well, young people such as ourselves, but also marginalized communities. Cultural institutions are, after all, big motors of social cohesion and also a way of reaching different groups that wouldn't necessarily always go through official channels. So yes, it pertains to a different department, of course, but integration of crisis preparedness goals into programs such as Creative Europe, which fund cross-border projects across the EU, could be something that could increase awareness, certainly across different groups. Thinking of examples such as Tales from the Ukraine, which is a different scope, arguably, but that was a project funded by Creative Europe, which published children's books for Ukrainian refugees across Europe. That's more, of course, after things happen, but I do believe that some collaboration with that kind of fund can be quite beneficial and bring a lot to risk awareness. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. A lot of intervention on vulnerable people, how to protect them, and awareness around it. Maybe we can take a couple of more intervention on the floor. I think Erika, you wanted? Yes, Erika.
Hello. So I'm going to spend just a few moments to really highlight the remarks that had already been discussed related to persons with disabilities today and youth with disabilities, and talk about the importance of overall disability inclusion, but also accessibility, which I think sometimes we do not really look into. And I really appreciate all the conversations that we as a group have had today already on disability inclusion, but also the remarks that have already been shared. And I think at this point, it's very evident that we all know that persons with disabilities, young persons with disabilities, do face greater risks in times of disasters, right? That's not a question. Time and time again, it's been established. We're good on that point in terms of awareness. I think to me, the real questions are, however, at this point, so what are we doing about it? And are we doing enough? I think the former president of Finland, in his report to the European Commission last year, Mr. de Neste, really highlighted that in order to better prepare and to protect persons who are vulnerable in crisis, we really must invest in inclusive preparedness at the community level. And to me, what that really means from the context of youth with disabilities is that at every stage of this process, from planning to the actual decision making to then ultimately the implementation, we need to have a seat at the table. And if we're not there, I think we're doing something wrong. And I think this goes from every single element that we've talked about today, including budgets. If we're not included in the budgets, if accessibility is not included in the budget, we are indeed an afterthought. And I think this goes from anything to provide concrete examples if emergency alert systems are not accessible. For example, if they're only auditory, if the only way to know a crisis is coming is through a sound, we're basically telling part of our community, it's okay, everyone else knows about this emergency, but you don't need to have this. And this is, for example, in the context of persons who are deaf or hard of hearing. Then we go into the crisis training. If our first responders don't know how to best support persons with disabilities and protect their dignity in times of crisis, we're also being forgotten in this narrative. And it also comes to the resources and the knowledge sharing about disaster preparedness. And here, I'm happy to share a positive example from Sweden. Recently, this year, all of us citizens got this little booklet in the mail, and on the front in Swedish, it says, I'll translate. It says, if the crisis comes and when the war comes. Personally, as a person with low vision, this is not accessible to me. I would not be the person you want to sit next to when this has to be read, as I will not be able to contribute. However, in the case of Sweden, they have accessible formats of this booklet online, both in Braille and in audio. So I, as a person who uses accessible technology, can access it and learn. And now it's on me, who hasn't read it yet online, using the accessible tools to really understand. So it's really this opportunity to work together and not in silos. And that's what I really urge the EU. So essentially, when the next crisis comes, and as we've said today, we know it will, I hope we're in a situation where we're not asking ourselves, did we do enough? And instead, we can all collectively have the response of, yes, we really did do everything we can because we worked together, we didn't work in silos, and we didn't think of persons with disabilities as an afterthought. Instead, they are part of every single stage. Because ultimately, an inclusive and accessible community is a safer community for all of us. Thank you.
Wow. Indeed, thank you, Erika. Thanks a lot for sharing your experience, sharing your point, your experience, your point of view. It's really important. Thanks for that. Maybe I will give the floor to Dragos next.
Thank you. I would really like to discuss about the possibility of creating an organized framework for NGOs to act in the case of a crisis in the EU, because I believe NGOs are usually seen as trusted actors within their communities, and they already have the expertise necessary to intervene in case a disaster or an emergency impacts, especially disproportionately, people from vulnerable communities. So as my colleague Emilia has said when she was presenting the work that we prepared this morning, I believe that having a platform where NGOs can register and they can actually present their profile, as in they have the capability to act for people with disabilities, or they have the capability to act in an isolated linguistic community or in an isolated area. They have this amount of staff capacity, they have this amount of social workers, of people who have expertise in psychological treatment. I believe it's a way to leverage all of the impact that NGOs have in their local communities across Europe in order to create a coordinated network in case of a crisis. Because we have all of these organizations which are very present in their communities, they're respected, they're trusted by the members of their communities, but there is no way to centralize the response in case of a major crisis. So maybe looking into the possibility of putting together all of our efforts and seeing exactly that if we have a natural disaster, or if we have some sort of epidemic or health emergency, how exactly we can coordinate the response with EU authorities, with our national authorities, and obviously with our communities to see exactly what needs are not met and how the NGO sector can step up and actually prove that it is a valuable actor who knows the needs of its community best. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dragos. I think it's related to the whole society approach as well, how we coordinate everybody. Would you like to share some input?
But you know, when it comes to the preparedness strategy, is based on the NINISTO report. And the NINISTO report says that we need a whole of hazard, whole of society, whole of government approach. And in between, there is certainly NGOs' role. And we need to have the NGOs on board. But the first responders and the first competence is within the member states. They have to act, they have to respond, they have to protect their citizens. So first, it's the member states, I mean the government, the local government, the regional and so on, and it's a whole of society approach to NGOs as well, the education, the private sectors and so on. And so I agree with you, we need everybody and every skills on board. So I can't agree more than saying, okay, we need to have NGOs that can maybe create links, a direct link within the different responders.
Definitely. Thanks for that input. Thanks a lot. Someone else? Let's go, yes, over there. Yeah. Laurette, yeah. And then Hannah. Thanks.
So Laurette Boutin from France. I would first of all really thank you for proposing this idea of creating a kind of Erasmus version of emergency preparedness. I really think that it would work a lot and incentivize people to get educated on emergency preparedness and disaster preparedness. With this, as we've mentioned before, disinformation has been brought up by every single one of us. And I think a main solution to this is education. And unfortunately, today in societies, not every person has access to good education. And this can really be, the gap in education can really be shortened by the help of youth organizations on the ground. I would really urge the EU to advocate for this and encourage governments to put this into place and to really include emergency preparedness and disaster preparedness in academic curriculums, in schools, universities, also maybe in tutorial sessions that happen after schools for communities that have less resources to put these kind of things into place. I know that it's not a competence of the EU, so that's why I really think that this could be an idea that is promoted and really encouraged for governments to put this in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurette. Indeed, it's not the competence of the EU, but I think it's a good idea. The idea of having emergency preparedness at every school in the EU could be quite interesting to develop. Yes, thank you. Yes. Someone, Hannah, yes, please.
I actually want to finish on a positive note because I believe that every emergency, every crisis has its end. I want to believe in this. And I think here is the role of the EU as the humanitarian donor, international donor, is to help with the recovery, to help to build back better. So we have more stronger, more resilient communities. We have places where displaced people can come back to their homes and renew their life in a better place. Thank you.
It is said that we should never waste a good crisis. I'm a strong believer on this sentence. It's kind of philosophy. Maybe it is why I was chosen for being a commissioner for crisis management and preparedness. But thank you to all of you. Thank you for your ideas. It gives me a lot of food for thoughts, and I will go back in my office with a lot of ideas. But you know, this exchange is a first exchange. We will continue during the whole mandate as other commissioners. The whole college is leading the same exercise, exchange with youth, and to be sure that we have your ideas, your opinions, to be sure that you are part of the process. At the table. So you have a seat at the table, and thank you for your rich ideas, and be sure that we will take into account your proposition. Everything as a follow-up will be published. Let me check. So the report will be made available on the European Youth Portal and other relevant platforms. So I encourage you to provide feedback, share your experience with also other young, and also to give your feedback to the partners here that are going to collect it and like that we can go forwards and so on. So thank you again. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having taken the time today. Indeed, I think we saw today that preparedness is really at every level, that we should all be aware and we should all be prepared and prepare our neighbors as well. We are keeping the idea of the Erasmus Plus of preparedness, and I would like to finish this dialogue by something that the Commissioner said earlier: be bold and be engaged. Thanks a lot for today. Yeah. Can you please all come on stage? We will do a photo all together, and then we will have a coffee break downstairs.
For sure.
Should we say that all together, maybe? 1, 2, it's okay? 1, 2, 3. Be bold and get engaged. And be prepared. Thank you.